Ashley Wyrick. Welcome to the Rocky Mountain Writer Podcast.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for your time this afternoon. We appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great.
You have a master class coming up at the October Colorado Gold Conference in Denver for Rocky Mountain fiction writers. That's the main reason we're talking. And the
Yes.
topic is query letters, which, of course, there's no shortage of things we can talk about with query letters. We'll get to that.
No.
There
Yeah.
are, yeah. So, but just could you just introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about yourself and what services you and your company offer.
Yeah, thank you so much. Ashley, and I live out here in Colorado. Love Colorado so much. And I am an editor. So I started out with a internship to a small company, publishing company, as an intern, ran through query after query after query, and moved my way up in the ranks to acquisitions editor. So I got a few books through that, published through a couple of companies, and then recently, because of COVID, was let go and started my own freelance business. And it really took off after that. So we are an editing company. We do all types of edits, from content to copy edits. And I also do query edits. So yeah, that's kind of the gist of it.
That's fantastic. Do you specialize in a certain genre?
Yeah, so we are definitely full novels, not children's books. We are fiction mostly. We can do some memoirs if they're creative enough, but we definitely stick on the fiction side. And we we really like the sci-fi and fantasy, but we can do all kinds of different genres as long as they're full length and fiction.
And when you say we, who's the we now at this point?
Oh, yes. So it started out just me in my kitchen, at
Mhm.
my little desk in my kitchen. And about 7 years later, I have three more editors working for me and an assistant. So we're really excited. Like I said, when I got let go of COVID and I really put a lot of effort into that business, it just took off. So yeah, there's a bunch of us in a group now, and we're loving it.
And do you take in books at what stage do you take in books? When somebody's getting ready to query an agent, or do they have to? Can it just be somebody who said, "I finished a manuscript. I need some outside eyes"?
Yeah, exactly. So on our website, we actually do have the options of my book's almost finished, my book's not quite finished yet, or I've already had it edited before and just need some more edits. All those stages. Usually the book needs to be finished by the time we work on it. But if you know you're going to be finished within a month or so, you can book us out and give yourself a deadline. I know a lot of authors really like that option because they don't know when they'll get it finished. But if they have it scheduled, then they'll make sure and get it done on time. Procrastinators, right?
Yeah, and I assume there's already probably a lead time right now. You can't start work on my book tomorrow. You're going to be you
Right.
want to get in the queue.
Right. And it depends on the editors too. If you want to work with some of my associates too, we all specialize in different areas. So we've got a middle grade. She's adorable. And we've got someone who really likes the historical side of sci-fi. And then we've got our space opera person. It just really depends on who it is and how busy they are at the moment.
Very cool. And is this what I would call developmental editing in terms of feedback on the story structure and the characters and how things are flowing? It's not line editing.
Right, right. Yeah. So these are for, yeah, all of the editorial assessments, which are kind of a broader view, and then the developmental editor, more paragraph and chapter line. And then, yeah, of course, we can do copy edits and proofreads on anyone.
Okay,
So
great, great. So I don't know if you want to name the company that you used to work for where you used to get query letters, do you? Or
yes, I can. Yeah, that's fine. So I started off with Jollyfish Press, a very small company. They were like a family to me. They were fantastic. About the time I moved into the acquisition position, they were bought out by North Star Editions, which is a bit of a bigger company, and they have sort of smaller imprints. And so I was able to move on with them. And I worked for them for about 2 years before the COVID kind of our department.
Yeah.
So.
What kind of volume of queries were you getting there?
Oh gosh, more than I could look through every day. Even with the smaller company, Jollyfish, we were unagented, so we allowed all kinds of things to come in, and we saw all kinds of stuff come in, which meant there was a lot, but there was a lot of strange ones, a lot of fun ones. I really saw everything you could see when it comes to queries on that end, and yeah, there was a lot. We had a team of probably five of us that would screen the queries before the editors actually had a chance to look at them. So I got to know kind of who would like which query and which books and all that, and mark it down for them. So
Yeah.
saw lots of those for sure.
And how many books a year was that company publishing? I mean,
Oh
I was just trying to
gosh.
give folks an idea of the volume of incoming queries versus the number of titles being published.
Oh, not very many. It's a very small margin. We had Uh, probably five acquisition editors with that company. And so usually if they took on one or two books a year, because it takes about that long to get all the way through the process. So you're talking
10,
15, maybe.
10 or
Yeah,
15.
out of hundreds, thousands even a year.
Well, and more queries than you said you could even get to in a day. And then
Yes.
this
Yeah.
company publishing 15 books a year, that gives folks an idea of how important the query letter is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you've got this master class. I believe is it a 3-hour class coming up?
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to give everything away at all. We want people to sign up and come to this class. But how are you going to approach this topic? What are some of the bigger themes you're going to touch on?
Right. So my title is Queries Simple, Solid, and Striking, because we really just want to keep it as simple, as short, but also like able to stand on its own 2 feet. We want it solid. We want people to know exactly what they need to know with something simple, but also with the minimal aspect of it, you have that opportunity to be really striking with what you have to say. If you are concise and you say just what you need to say and nothing more, it can really be powerful when it comes across to an agent or an acquisitions editor. When we can look at something and see keywords here and there and nothing else to distract us, then that's really, I think, the key. And so that's really what I'm going to focus on, is that minimalist, but powerful way to write a query letter.
Do you understand how much terror this strikes in the heart of somebody who's finished a novel and think they're ready to submit it to a house?
Honestly, I have not. So I don't know the extent. I can't. However, I've talked to so many who really do fear this. And I think there's a lot of fear about it because there's not a lot of information out there about it. You can Google, you can get on Pinterest and look, and you're going to get a bajillion different people telling you to do it a bajillion different ways. And so I think that's probably part of what's scary about it. It's also somewhat like a resume or a cover letter. And people are also very scared of those too, especially those who haven't written them or haven't been on the receiving end of them. So I've had been on that receiving end, and so therefore I feel confident in them and I understand them. And so I just want to give that understanding and that confidence to the people who can say, I've had someone who knows exactly what they're doing, tell me how to do it, and this is it. So that's what I'm hoping to get through.
I think probably the hardest part is summarizing the freaking book you've written. And just
Yes.
knowing, the writer's tendency is you've got to get this subplot in, and you just have to know about this one character that my protagonist meets that changes everything. And then you want to describe 3 of the best settings you've got, the most unusual kind of
Mm-hmm.
backdrops for your action. I mean, you just feel so much pressure to condense 100,000 words into something brief. How do
Yeah.
you how do you coach how do you coach somebody to be concise, I guess?
Yeah. Well, part of that is help break down their story into the bare bones. That's what I always talk about with most of it is bare bones, bare bones. Let's pare it down. Let's figure out exactly what they need to know. Leave the rest as a surprise. A lot of times, you don't want to give everything away, right? Until you read the book. And even if you somehow in 3 paragraphs get every single thing about your book into those 3 paragraphs, there's going to be a number of things going on there. And the first is that now they've read your book, but they haven't read it in your writing. They haven't read it with your magic. The synopsis is not magical necessarily. Now, there is some personality to it and there is some storytelling to it, but it's not your book. So you need to leave some of that out. I usually use the example of like Cinderella and just go through. We need to know that she's poor, that her stepsisters are horrible, but we don't need to know about the cat. We don't need to know about the dog or the mice, right? In a synopsis, we don't need those things. What we need is the general plot, and how you craft that part then is what makes you stand out. So if you have to leave out some of your favorites, if you have to leave out some of your babies, it's in the book still. And so you need to let that be okay. You just have to be okay with it, I suppose.
Mhm. What are some of the biggest mistakes you've seen query writers make?
I think there's two, and one we kind of touched on is being concise. If it's really rambly, if the sentences are super long and jumbly and they don't quite make sense, that's a big turnoff, because then that tells us that you can't fully explain your own book, which means your book probably won't stand on its own. So being concise is number one. But number two is statements that don't necessarily belong. Like, I know you're super busy and I just really appreciate you taking all the time to blah, 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 to the agent. We know we're busy, right?
Yeah.
You're wasting your space saying that when you could use that space for something important. So nothing in your career letter should be haphazard or thrown in there. Every single word needs to be exactly what you want it to say, nothing else. So I think, yeah, just adding in some of those. Sometimes we'll get things like, my kids really loved this book, I hope you do too. And it's like, well, we don't know your kids, we don't know, and yeah. So some of those types of comment are just sort of, you can tell it has a confidence issue. Be confident in your book, and put that in your query letter. You shouldn't have to say things like that.
It's a query letter. They know it's a query letter. Just meet in the middle. When you open the envelope,
Yep.
open the email, I guess. Get to the point. This is how it goes. So just jump in and
Right.
yeah. Did you ever get letters from folks who had no idea, basically, and hadn't done any research and understood what kinds of books your publishing house was interested in?
Yeah. So we did have some that would send us children's books, and we were strictly middle grade and young adult. We would also get a lot of them that were adult, which some of us would go, oh, this looks so good, but we can't do it. It's not our company's thing. And a lot of us, we don't necessarily know of a company where we could say, hey, but you should send it here. Wish we did. But sometimes we just have to go, oh, that's a bummer. I hope they get on somewhere else. And so, yeah, and that is it's kind of a waste of our time. So it's a really good idea to make sure you know who you're querying, because we do run through, like I said, more than I could get through in a day. And so if I see this and I'm going, oh, wow, this is really cool. This is really cool. Oh, it's adult. You've wasted my time. Right. And so that's one of the biggest things, is not wasting their time. That's why we're concise. That's why we're solid and simple and that kind of thing.
Does it help when a query letter writer says something like, well, I noticed your publishing company publishes X, Y, or Z, and I'm a big fan of X, Y, or Z, and my stuff is right in line with that?
Yeah. So to a certain extent, it is, you don't want to spend too much time on it. But if you just have a quick little, I saw this book, I really liked it from your company, this kind of relates to it, and then move on. What we don't want is flattery necessarily, but you get that sometimes too, especially with people who I don't know that they know how to write the query letter, and they'll come in and flatter and we love this and this and spend a lot of time on it, which is cool at one point. So we're like, oh yeah, cool. I'm glad you like our stuff. But then it's also, okay, where's your book? Where's your book? Right. I want to know more about your book, not about our book type thing.
Right. And I assume it's very important in terms of just making sure it's proofread and clean. It's going to be a representation of your
Yes.
ability to edit your own work and show up with a good story that's in good shape to be read, right?
Right. And I would actually, of course, I'm biased because I am an editor, but I think every manuscript needs at least one content edit by somebody professional. You can do beta readers if you really want to go that route. But you'd want to make your research good on that to make sure that you know the beta readers that are doing the work for you. Or hire an editor just to make sure that your plot is clean, to make sure that your characters at least make some sort of sense. Because a lot of times it's hard for you to see that yourself, right? Which is why you have friends read it and that kind of thing. But a professional is really going to be in there to dig in and notice those things that a lot of people who are just passingly reading it aren't going to notice. And so it's important, even if you're sending to an agent who will do their own edits or a publishing house who will also do their own edits, it's important to get it done for yourself too, because if we start reading it, where I was working, we would read the first chapter or so and then request a full manuscript and read the whole thing before we acquired it. So I'm going to be reading the whole book. And if it's not solid, I'm an editor and I notice it's not solid. It's not going to be worth my time to acquire it. So the less work I have to do, the better. So that I would suggest at least getting an editorial assessment, that 30,000 feet look at your book, just to make sure that everything is mostly solid at the least.
Yeah. Did you ever see a mismatch between, say, a query letter that wasn't like the snappiest and it wasn't simple, solid, and striking, but nonetheless the idea was sort of intriguing enough that you said, boy, I want to read this?
Yeah. So where that really comes in is that sample that you send in. They usually ask you first chapter, first 3 chapters, something like that. Sometimes, so it's really subjective, right? This whole business is subjective. If an editor or an agent is reading through queries, they could have been through 10 before they hit yours. If they're in a really good mood, they may make it to that and they may be like, wow, this book is awesome. The query isn't that great, so I need more information. But you read through that first chapter and it's just, bam, really awesome. But it's really, you're almost lucky to get yourself there if the query isn't very good, because it's really easy to read that first part, that hook that I talk about as the first part in your query letter. It's really hard to make it past that sometimes, because a lot of times we're just like, nope, snap judgments. That's the whole business right here. So you have to be, you have to really get it, like I said, that solid and that striking. But it is possible to not have a great query and still get in, but you'd have to be really lucky. You
Yeah.
kind of have to be lucky anyways. You have to be really lucky.
And I assume the inverse is amply true. You get plenty of awesome looking query letters. You think, oh, this is a no-brainer. I'm going to love this book. And you get the book and it's just a complete letdown from the opening paragraph.
Yeah. That happens a lot when we do make it through the query and we go, I kind of like this concept, because you're getting the concept, you got kind of a little synopsis going on and you're kind of feeling it. But where you really find out what you need is that first chapter, where you see their writing and you can really see their style, how it feels when you get in, the momentum and the tone, that kind of thing you don't find in the query letter that you do in the book. And so sometimes we'll be like, wow, what a cool idea, and get to it and it just really falls flat. It's just really, I don't like the way this sounds. This doesn't feel right. And so, the inverse is true as well, which is why when I do query edits with my company, I always look at the first chapter. So I will look at their query, their synopsis, and the first chapter because it's equally as important as the letter itself.
That's a generous approach on your part because some places are query first and only, and that's the gatekeeping
Mm.
kind of path to getting the rest seen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, query letters have been around. They've survived the internet, the dawn of the internet. They've survived the pandemic, I guess, obviously. I mean,
Yeah.
query letters have been around forever. And it seems like just sort of, I don't know, is there a better way to this? Because there's so much pressure on that query letter to get it right. And it is that opening handshake. It's the opening entree.
Mm-hmm.
It's I guess in food, the little appetizer, trying to get you in the door to please eat my whole meal.
Mm-hmm.
Is there? Do you know of a better way that we could do this without so much pressure on this
You
one
know,
document?
when I talk to people about it, one of my biggest things to bolster up these queries is to be on social media. Twitter is huge. Twitter is so big when it comes to the author community, publishing community. There is contests, there's all kinds of fun little Twitter parties and stuff that you can get on. And people are out there on Twitter. They may be on Instagram too, but I think Twitter is the biggest one. And
I
you
am
can
completely 100% in agreement with you.
good on that one. Yeah. Yeah. So as an acquisitions editor, when people would direct message me on Twitter and say, this is kind of what my book is. It seems like something you might like. Then I have a name and I tell them, sure, go ahead and query me. And in that case, you'll put in the heading, attention, Ashley Wyrick, so that I make sure and I see it and I look at that one. And then I have a name with the book and I've had a conversation. Now, if you query me and say, hey, I have a children's book, then I'm like, well, that's not my thing. That's not my thing. But if you query me with something interesting, then, or DM me with something interesting, then I definitely invite you to query, even though you can query me anyways. But if you talk to me first, then you have that in. And it may seem intimidating to reach out to a publisher or an agent and say something, but I never minded it. So there are some people out there who don't mind it. Some may never respond back to you, but what's the worst that can happen? They don't respond back, right?
Right.
So it's worth a shot getting out there. Also, pay attention to those Twitter parties. They have some awesome pitch wars and they have really cool opportunities where you have the opportunity to tweet something about your book and an agent or an editor can get on and like it. And that means they want you to submit to them. So there's all kinds of little parties like that that give you an in. It gives you a step forward. And those really the best way to bolster up those query letters. Otherwise, it's sort of like a cold call. But if you have that relationship with somebody, it's less like a cold call and a little warmer, if you know what I mean.
Boy, I think that's a really good point. To expand and think a little more broadly about how you're engaging. Maybe you're targeting Ashley Wyrick. Maybe you have a handful, and you probably should have a handful of
You
your
should.
top choices that you'd love to be with, and then start to engage them. Start to see what kinds of things they're commenting about. Look for those parties, like you say, pitch fest, pitch wars, whatever they might be, and
Mm-hmm.
make yourself a presence there. So when the letter shows up, you're an entity. You've got
Yes.
some agency, I guess.
Yes.
Just like
Yes. Exactly.
your characters have agency, you're giving yourself agency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's great. So Ashley, what do you get out of this? You seem like you really enjoy doing what you do. Can you put that in words?
Uh, you know, I overcame a lot to be here. And this is something I've loved since I realized I was in third grade reading Harry Potter. And I laid in my bed for an entire day and read the third Harry Potter book all in one day. And everyone thought I was crazy, but I just loved it so much. And when I got into college, I started the theater and ended up changing to English. And I've just always been in the arts. I've just always had that written art kind of gene in me. And so when I graduated, I didn't even know about this job. Actually, I didn't even know that you could be an editor. And someone mentioned it to me, and my first thought was, ew, grammar. I don't want to do grammar stuff. But I fell in love with it. And then when I worked my way through the grammar stuff and started learning that content stuff, it really is just a huge passion of mine. I love being able to work with, especially first time authors who don't really, they have fantastic ideas and they just have to get it out there. And so my job helping them put what's in their head onto that paper so that there's no misconnection there is just so rewarding. And when their book gets out there and they're excited, I'm excited. It's just part of being something, it's being a part of something really cool. And I just get to do it over and over and over again. It's just, I love it. It is my life.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit about the challenges you had to overcome? What were they?
Yeah, so I got married really young while I was in college, and I was in the theater department when I got pregnant with my first child. And during it's called a sophomore review, but it's sort of where all the staff comes together and you meet with all of them and kind of discuss how you're doing. And before I walked in, I actually heard my advisor introduce me as, this girl is 21, she is pregnant, and she thinks she's God's gift to theater, which I was so upset by because I had only been in her office all of 5 minutes the entire 2 years I had been in the department. And so I had to walk into this room to this long table full of professors and walk in there knowing that she had introduced me that way, and then proceed to listen to professors tell me I'm not good at this and I'm not around enough because, well, guess what? I have a kid on the way and I'm married, and, so I'm not doing extracurriculars like I need to, and this and that. And I had two professors that I was really close to that I felt like I'd been good in their class, and I was waiting for them to speak up, and neither one of them did. So I walked out of that meeting completely beaten down, completely feeling like I couldn't do anything. And that's what actually switched me though to the English department. And that, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't be doing editing right now. I'd be in theater. I'd probably be a theater teacher at a high school right now. And so glad that I'm not in that way. Yeah. And so, and then in the English department, when I got ready to do student teaching, because I was going to do education, they also told me my grades weren't good enough, that nobody was going to let me student teach. And at that moment, I was either going to stand up and say I'm going to do it anyways, or I was going to back down. And again, I backed down. I hadn't had enough life experience in me to stand up and say, no, I'm going to do this. And in the end, I'm really grateful that I didn't, because that graduated me with just a standard English degree. And so coming out of that, then I had no idea what I was going to do with it, because everybody they want a marketing degree or a communication, they don't want just straight English. They want something more generalized. So without coming out of college like that, though, I wouldn't have found out about this job and I wouldn't be here. And so that's some of the adversity I've had to overcome for sure, just to get where I'm at.
Wow. Well, I think it is good to look back and know certain points in life went one way you thought they should have gone, went another way, and then still wound up, doing okay, and you're doing very well, obviously. Especially, sounds like you're
Thank you.
busy and extremely productive, and you're helping lots and lots of writers achieve their dreams. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations. So just as we wrap up here, I always like to give our guests a chance to recommend a writer or, somebody you think more people should be reading. So now's your chance.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, one of my favorites that has been indie published in the last 2 years was called The Soul of Liscaris, and is by Robert Beck. He is one of my all-time favorite authors because he's such a fantastic guy. And that book is goosebumps everywhere all the time. His descriptions just are beautiful. And it's a time travel sort of sci-fi fantasy type thing. It's just really, really neat. And it's based off of the lore and legends that go around Lysaker in England. And so it actually won an award in Cornwall for one of the best books based on a folklore. So really cool book. Again, that's The Soul of Lyskerus by Robert Beck.
Any chance you could spell Lyskerus just so we get it?
Yes, Lyskerys. Lyskerus. Yeah.
Fantastic. And just to get on the record, where can people find you online, your website or social media?
Yeah. Yeah. So my website is www.statusquill.com. Because we are changing the status quo with the Status Quill.
UILL, Status Quill.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And how about Twitter?
I'm just Ashley_Wyrick on Twitter right now. Yeah.
Great. And folks heading to the RMFW conference in October, sign up for that masterclass and get your query letter polished up and doing it right. Solid, simple, solid, and striking. That's great. Ashley, thank you so much for your time today, and hope to see you in October.
Awesome. Thanks. See you there.